We continue, of course, to bring you some reaction as Eskom hopes to have most of its units back to full functioning by Thursday evening. Eskom's head of generation, Philip Dukashe, told the media a short while ago that it will give the utility the power to suspend load shedding. For analysis on the development is energy expert Ted Blom. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. We heard Eskom speak about a shortfall in generational capacity being the result of what they say was them not being able to recover over the long weekend. What are your thoughts on some of the feedback we got this morning?
Okay, so I think if one stands back and not allow the crisis to overwhelm you, what's very clearly emerging is that there seems to be a problem with Eskom maintenance. It's been a problem for at least 3 years now. As the current management said, they were going to overhaul and refurbish all the old plant. That has not taken place. That money that would have gone to that has been diverted towards putting in more renewable energy and batteries. So this has been a long time in coming. And Eskom hit a record of over 17,000 megawatts of power being offline, unplanned breakages on Sunday, and that necessitated them burning 20 OCGTs or open cycle gas turbines. So the situation is very, very dire and very, very serious, especially if you add onto it the fact that there's a cut of around 700 megawatts going to Durban or eThekwini, which normally would have gone to that part of the world. So in effect, we've got level 4 load shedding, and if eThekwini was not ravaged by the floods, we would have had at least level 5 load shedding. Yes, the situation is very bad, and I'm not sure how quickly Eskom can recover the situation, given that whenever this happens, the balance of the fleet that is still operating is put under inordinate stress to try and keep some power in the grid. And that invariably leads to even further breakdowns. In other words, a compounding of the breakdowns because we are running whatever is left behind and running. We're running it much harder than would have been the case if more units were available.
Mr. Blom, as I speak to you, I'd like to just bring our viewers into the conversation there. As right on the side of your screen, you'll see Basic Education Minister Angie Motshekga assessing the extent of damage in KwaZulu-Natal, speaking to the plans that need to be put in place and the social, cohesion in terms of the various departments coming together with a solution. Mr. Blom, you speak about eThekwini, and we know that some of the reasons that have been put forward by the Eskom management team is the challenge of the persistent rains of more than 5 days, posing a major issue when it comes to some of the units that have been damaged.
Okay, so Eskom has proffered the story of, or the excuse of wet coal for a number of years. For anybody who comes from the technical side, you'll know that that's absolute rubbish. The UK has rainy weather for more than 200 days a year, and when they ran on coal, they never had load shedding one day because of wet coal. So I think one needs to put that aside. That's a nonsense story. The reason why wet coal or rain affects Eskom is because they're not procuring correct coal. They're procuring sludge or discard or fine coal, which is not normally part of their procurement diet. And yes, if they're not procuring the right diet for the burners, then you can expect problems. Whether it is excessive rock and abrasiveness in the coal, which is causing boiler tube leaks and explosions, or whether it is fine coal, too much fine coal or discard, which they normally wouldn't buy, which when it gets wet, it's a bit like Johnson's baby powder getting wet. It becomes very sticky and it sticks to the conveyors and the stays that feed the boilers. So if there's any problem with wet coal, it's purely of Eskom's own making because of the criminality on the coal procurement side and the incompetence and ineptitude on the coal procurement side. They've known since 2007. I was in fact hired at Eskom in 2006 to revisit the coal procurement program because they knew that they were going to be running tight on on coal. They hadn't built new power stations at that stage, and they were running out of the reserves of the old coal power stations. As you know, coal does not replenish itself, so once it's burnt up, you need to find new coal fields. The old ones are depleted, and that exercise has not been done even to today. We were warned that from 2015, 2016, there would be a problem on the supply and availability of proper coal for Eskom, and that's where the Guptas jumped on the bus. You'll remember that the Guptas jumped on the bus, and then started supplying coal at exorbitant prices and poor quality to Eskom. And my knowledge or my information, which I get from a learned source, is that even Kusile, which is a brand new power station, has had probably half of its life eroded by the feeding of non-standard or non-spec coal into its boilers with far too much abrasiveness. Now, that same aspect has happened across the fleet, as the corruption at Eskom's coal procurement is total. It's across the whole fleet.
And, you know, as you speak about those major challenges, we also know a question was posed as one wants to assess the load-shedding outlook for winter, and the probabilities are speaking now for extreme. We could have 101 days of load-shedding as we go into the winter season. I mean, looking at the assessment on the quality of coal and that prediction going into winter, what do you make of the number? Is it accurate?
Okay, so officially Eskom still stands at 61 days that they announced to the public. They inadvertently dropped 100 plus days during the last press conference about a week ago when they switched over to the operations planning executive, who seemingly spoke out of turn and then dropped the number of over 100 days of potential load shedding under a worst case scenario. Well, I'm on a Twitter group which follows, amongst others, Mr. Koko. And despite all his shortcomings, and people must now just catch a wake up and understand that those misdemeanors need to be dealt with in another forum. But Mr. Koko is still the most competent engineer Eskom's had probably in the last 20 years. And he has made public a document that Eskom doesn't normally publicize, covering the maintenance schedule for the next year, so into April 2023. And during that period, on that schedule, there's only 5 weeks where there is not a high prospect of load shedding. So the 101 days is in Eskom's terms, a worst case scenario. But if they were more honest and more transparent, you'd see that the load shedding is probably going to carry on for more than 45 weeks if one listens and puts any weight onto their own maintenance schedules, which Mr. Koko has publicized.